Well, here we are. Here we are. Interesting times here. I think the episode title for Friday is going to be Jim Carrey and that Me, Myself, and Irene. Like, here we go again. Live through this. Live through the entire XFL CFL merger talks. You could have pushed me over with a feather yesterday driving to work. Listener Seth texts me. I see it pop up on driving. XFL and USFL to merge. Not kidding. I saw Sam Shady posted in the group chat. Mark's article quoting Axios. This is wild times. Crazy yesterday. I was filming. Happy to get on today. I did my little instant YouTube shorts reaction yesterday, talking and kind of trying to get. I was stuck filming the conference for the last 3 days, like 12 hours filming every day. Happy everybody could stop on today. But it was funny. I was watching all the content creators yesterday going crazy, and I'm like, dang it, I built this podcast talking merger talks. It's kind of like Dr. Dre, like everybody acts like they forgot about Dre because we are here. Evan standing by. Anthony Miller is going to be coming on. Mike Mitchell is going to be coming on. If people want to call in, we got comments. Going to be wild here, probably for an hour 15 or so. We'll see how we do. Evan, how are you doing? This is the wildest timeline. Time is a flat circle. All the different things right now.
Yes, it's a wild time, and I'm still stunned that this is even up for consideration. I understand that we have to keep in mind, right? Like, this news is not official; it has not been announced by either league. We're going off a lot of rumors right now, but there is a lot of evidence to believe that this will happen, and obviously the timeline, I think, being one of the more surprising things. Like, I put out a tweet, saying that I never really thought this was totally possible, but we've obviously brought it up in discussions many times. But that was, for way down the line. I mean, 2025 at the earliest, but now that we're already looking at this after only one full season of XFL play and, 2 seasons of USFL play, that's a major development for all of us, and, not something that I expected. It's very interesting to see, how fast this is developed. I mean, it went from, really nothing at all to boom, there's an article out, that's got all these, details in it. But you can tell it's happened fast because there's a lot of people, in both leagues that, from what I understand, have not been read into the situation. So definitely a quickly changing time for sure. Definitely a lot on the plate here, and excited to dive into it, and go through some of the details, or at least all the details that we can cover, in an hour and 15 minutes, because there are a lot of questions, surrounding this topic. And even myself, my mind is still kind of spinning, racing through all the possible scenarios.
Yeah, I guess we should just preface here. So we have the Axios article, right? Scoop, football leagues, XFL and USFL and merger talks. Like I said, Seth is sending this to me yesterday. It's weird. Kind of whoever you talk to, and I know Mike's been talking to people, and he's going to be joining in. Anthony, I think, is going to be on here at the top of the hour. I've heard Mike said, they were talking in July. They've been talking since post XFL champion or USFL championship game in July, talking through that. I've had listeners post on Facebook. Like, I was just emailing ticket rep people last week for both the XFL and the USFL. I'm like, they didn't know about this. And I've been texting people, and like you said, kind of whoever you talk to, it's either been going on since July or going on not at all. Obviously, the article here talking written by Tim Basinger, Dan Primack, and Sarah Fisher talking. The most surprising thing about this, obviously, is the pre-2024 is when this is planned to take place. Because obviously, like you said, we've talked for years, and this is going to be a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Obviously, everyone, I predicted this, like, everybody's talked about this happening sometime down the road. Nobody in their wildest dreams thought 2024, this is happening. Does the speed of that surprise you, Evan, that we're going at this? Like, I mean, we're September right now. Like, we're already doing season ticket deposits for the Vegas Vipers. And like, even that was already in question.
Oh, absolutely. In the words of Drake, 0 to 100 real quick. Man, this is, just so many things to think about. And, to the casual fan who doesn't follow these leagues, I think it's very interesting because I've seen a lot of comments, for people who don't understand that there is a big separation between the two. It's, there's people who think that they're the same thing. They can't tell the difference between the other. So for them, it really doesn't matter that much. But I've gone on record, for one, several times, saying that this was impossible, that this would never happen. The egos are too big; they get in the way. Both leagues have quietly taken shots at one another, and I believe at one point, Dany Garcia acknowledged, the existence of the USFL. It was a question that was brought up about competition, and even on the USFL side of things, I think Daryl Moose Johnston has said, has brought up things like in terms of ratings. He was very open at the end of the 2023 season, and I think the reality here is there was, to an extent, some disappointment on both sides. You also get a lot of these people who are, well, the XFL is coming to save the USFL, and the USFL is coming to save the XFL. It's not either of those. It's meant to be an equal partnership, as this article states, where both leagues can benefit. Obviously, we don't have the details yet. We don't know what any of this is going to look like, but this isn't really, one league, I think, trying to, completely dissolve the other, or a buyout or anything like that. I mean, that would be a completely different scenario. You have to keep in mind now, this whole talk, yes, they've been talking since, I think the date was July 1st, and it was RedBird Capital from the XFL who reached out to the USFL about this situation to see if there would be any interest. And if you want to go into how this started further, I believe Mike Mitchell was the one who was saying there were two personnel people or football ops people on either side of either league that kind of came together, had the idea, discussed it, brought it to a higher level, and those people at the higher level who had greater control over things said, yes, this might actually not be a bad idea, and we do have some level of interest. So again, I think that's kind of the initial knee-jerk situation from, again, what we've been able to gather. But again, very, very interesting. And, the timeline, as you've pointed out, that was the main question. For 2024, I don't think anybody really saw that as a possibility, and the logistics would be difficult enough even if they announced the merger now for 2025. I feel like, again, that the logistics would be very difficult to figure that out. But the fact that they want to do this in, less than a 6-month time frame is staggering. And I have doubts if they're going to be able to pull that off, at least in the way that they want it to. Maybe, the best way I can wrap my head around it now is maybe they have some sort of tier system. It's like, well, in 2024, we're going to have tier 1 of the merger that involves some elements that are easier to put together in the time frame that we've allowed. And then maybe in 2025, you move into tier 2, which is a full merger, or merger to whatever extent that they had an idea of in the first place. So again, there's a lot of scenarios that could happen there. I'm sure we're going to be talking about plenty of hypotheticals as the show goes on. But again, ultimately, that timeline that they've put in place is very short. And, maybe what ends up happening again is whatever the full merger is just isn't exactly what we think it is. And there's a lot less terms around it. Because I think in a lot of people's minds, you immediately jump to it's going to be one big league and all the operations are going to be put together. That's very possible, but at the same time, that's not stated anywhere. That wasn't a part of the initial release. It wasn't, we're going to have one big league with all these teams. Like, none of that's laid out yet. Right now it's just both sides are talking towards an agreement, and the talks have advanced since they began in July, which a lot of people did not know about. And therefore, that's why this news seems so sudden, even though it's been nearly, I guess, 3 months since, this is begun, which again, if you think about it, if both sides of both leagues have been talking for 3 months, then maybe there is a bit more truth to the situation than if they just started talking yesterday and then you go from there, because that would just seem silly. But I think, if just my last bit about the timeline, and this doesn't really have to do with 2024, but it actually has to do with this year. One of the things that I thought about when I initially heard this news was XFL season ended in May, right? You had the championship game in mid-May, and then the report about The Rock losing $60 million came out like end of May, early June. And this $60 million, The Rock, that whole number connection, whatever, has been a big piece, throughout this XFL offseason. People have been talking about that ad nauseum, saying, this is going to be the downfall of the XFL. They can't afford to lose that much money. And you've already seen the XFL change, some of their operations. They laid off a lot of their marketing people, and now you have coaches, at least position coaches, moving into seasonal employment or part-time employment where you are only being paid during the season. So, there are cost-cutting measures that already seem to be in effect. There's some restructuring that has already gone on quietly. And I find it interesting that, a couple weeks after this report came out about The Rock, losing $60 million, that RedBird reached out to the USFL saying, hey, would you be interested in developing a relationship and possibly, merging elements of our football operations together? So, that whole 60 million number and the timing and this, possibly becoming a merger, my theory behind this, and again, this is not going off anything that I know. This is just, what my thoughts have kind of led me to create some sort of conclusion here in the moment when we don't have a ton of information on paper is, I wonder if, I don't think that 60 million number ever signaled that the XFL was not going to have a season in 2024. I think anybody who thinks that or thought that the league was going to shut down then, they don't know what they're talking about. But I think it signified maybe, if they were going to have a season in 2024, that they were going to have more change than they initially planned for. They thought that there was going, or they believe that there would have to be more of a shift, for the season to happen the way that they would want it. And in order to do that, perhaps that's why they are pursuing this merger. That's the best way I can kind of think about it right now. Again, I don't think that 60 million number, will matter much in the long run. Again, it was a big deal. A lot of people were talking about it, and people, some people still talk about it. But I do think it could have played a role, as to why all of this has happened the way that it has. And again, I can't get over that sort of timing where just a couple weeks after the XFL season, you have RedBird reaching out in what seems to be, kind of sudden. And now clearly, I guess things may have been going on for the past couple months that we didn't know about. Even some people in the leagues clearly didn't know about. And now you're at this sort of area where it feels, they were saying, something could come out as soon as this week, next week. You're really talking about not a lot of time here, but if you think about, again, nearly 3 months of discussion behind closed doors, we don't know what's happened. So again, a lot of uncertainty, but with the timeline specifically, there's a lot of surprises there as well.
Yeah, let me get a couple things. Anthony standing by. I'll bring him in a minute. Paul gave it to a little super. You could do a little super chat on here. Really hope to keep the USFL brand, leaving the $2. A couple things before we get into all of this. A lot of people watching on Twitter. Just make sure you like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. I know these are a lot of our normal listeners, and Jenna's on here, and Harrison's on here, Max and Brett and everyone. But we've been here every week. This is week 163 talking XFL, USFL, CFL. Saw a lot of people come out the woodwork yesterday and there's stuff to talk about. We've been carrying the flag this whole time. Just appreciate that. It's a lot of work that goes into this. Evan comes on a lot of these shows. Anthony comes on, and Mike Mitchell, who's going to be joining us. It takes a family, it takes a village to kind of get this going. So I really appreciate that. Just before we get too deep into it, really, this was an interesting article because the only thing that was definite that we know is that they said that it was going to be structured as a merger of equals, would require regulatory approval. Well, I don't think there's big antitrust, things we're going through here. And then the games would be broadcast split between Fox and Disney, because obviously Fox owns that, whatever. We don't know where NBC would lead it, be left with that. They're paying Fox, and a lot of the, a good portion of the money that Fox is getting quoted as a non-insubstantial amount of money is coming from NBC for that. But, it just curious to me with this Axios report, like Evan said, I think more things will be coming out, but those were the definite things we knew, merger of the equals. So i.e. it's not XFL, absorbing USFL or USFL absorbing XFL. And then obviously the broadcast slate. I was glad, very glad to have a non-league branded specific podcast for this very reason. We went through this with the CFL, and we've been through these merger talks before. That got drug out for 4 months. I'm hoping that the XFL and USFL talks don't go on as long as the XFL and the CFL talks did, although we got a lot of podcasting out of that. But really curious. My last thought, we'll get to Anthony here. It's so weird where all of these things have been in the works. We had Russ Giulio on the podcast. He's when it was director of scouting. I can never remember his specific title. Vice president of football officiating or whatever. we did the showcases, we did the draft, we're doing the supplemental stuff. Like it feels like we're kind of rolling. If anything, USFL really goes kind of dark in the off season, where XFL is, hey, we're doing this, and like they're still tweeting out. We've got showcases coming up, and the teams are still tweeting out. Hey, like even today, I tweeted XFL, the Battlehawks and the Renegades both tweeting out like we're doing local charity events and local ticket things and being the part of the community. Like XFL, it just seems like it's business as normal. It just feels like a very odd time for this all to be coming about. Anthony, what do you make? Anthony covers the Renegades. We know the team over there and everything else. What do you make of all of this?
Still trying to process it. I feel like I'm going to be the doom and gloom guy, but while this is all very exciting, that this is something we've been talking about behind the scenes for a while, and oh man, love to see the XFL and USFL merge together. While it's exciting, I also think like this is desperation time. Like I think both leagues have to make this happen. This is not like when the XFL was talking to the CFL about whatever partnership it was. Like it wasn't the end of the world if it didn't happen. This could be the death of either one or both leagues if this doesn't come through. So I think both these leagues, this is a very telling sign for me that really shows that both leagues financially are in trouble. It may not be like in desperate. I don't know how much in trouble they are, but it's enough for them to entertain the idea where there's been subtle shots taken at each other from the XFL and the USFL side. For now, they're like, okay, let's put our differences aside and let's see if we can make this thing work. So, for me, if the XFL and USFL can't get it happen, I'm going to be honest. I think next year's the last year we're going to see both leagues survive, because either one is going to survive for 2025 or both are going to die after 2024. So I hate to be the doom and gloom guy, but this is desperation time. They need to figure out how to make this work, whatever capacity it is, whether it's just having 8 teams, if it's having 16, whatever it is, however they need to work it out, they need to happen. Now, on the exciting part is they can utilize each other's relationship. I mean, you just talked about the television deal. We can finally stop complaining about all the crappy cable games we've been getting, like on FX and ESPN2 and FS1. We wouldn't have to put up with that anymore, because this is a great opportunity for those leagues to be like, we could put almost every single game on national television. They could put it on Fox, they could put it on NBC, they could put it on ABC. Maybe you put a game on ESPN or ESPN2 here and there, but this would solve the television problem where you're gonna do really well in the ratings. So I think in that aspect, that's massive. I think it's gonna be a big win for them. Hopefully it can push some of these USFL teams, if they bring some that don't have a home, finally can get a home stadium to them. But it sounds like a lot of them that don't have home stadiums may not make the cut for the league, but it may force some of them to do that. So I think at the end of the day, like I said, this has to happen. I don't know what needs to be done. I don't know what egos need to be put aside, but I think both leagues realize if this conversation doesn't, end with them actually merging, I think we're looking at the end of spring football. I've seen it too many times, with the Alliance of American Football, with the UFL, with so many spring leagues in the last couple of decades, where finances have always doomed them. And I think we're getting close to, this doesn't happen, it's going to be the same ending for them.
Let me give a comment. We'll go back to Evan. Yeah, it's interesting. And I would just love to know and have, candid and kind of frank conversations with a lot of like the stakeholders in both of these leagues, because I remember, when Paul and I launched the channel, I mean, what are we talking to, 163 weeks ago now? Like I remember, we recorded the first episode and it's like the XFL is back. I'm like, man, we're going to put this thing on YouTube. Like we're going to get like thousands of views. Like it's going to be crazy. Like I can't wait. And, this is a really, really niche thing. And I have clients now in like my professional world, and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm like, oh, we have like 2,800 subscribers. Like, oh, like, really? I'm like, it's a really niche thing. And it's, especially like the hardcore fans are going to be doing this. Like, I just am always curious, like what the expectations were. Like, I do think Fox, thought we were going to commit, like, we're going to blow this out of the water. Like, this is going to be the next big thing. And we're going to be able to fill content and get millions of viewers, especially when they kind of did the first season on their own. And, we did 3 million for the kickoff and simulcast. We'd love to know, what Dany and Rock and, Jerry and everybody thought with the XFL. Like, man, we're going to come in. We've got, highest selling spirit in the world in Terramana. We just launched an energy drink, and like, like anything we touch, like this is so niche. And I've never thought like gotten that either one of these networks or not networks, like leagues really get kind of how niche the product is. Evan, thoughts on that or anything else? I'll just toss to you.
Yeah, well, now that we've kind of gotten the initial knee jerk, like there's an actual discussion of these leagues possibly merging out of the way, I've been trying to think about a lot of the positives and the negatives about what a merger would look like. And as Anthony's already pointed out, I think, one of the main reasons why a merger would even be a discussion is because of, television deals and ratings. It's no secret that, for both leagues, this year was somewhat of a disappointment when it came to, um, just viewership and overall interest. Like Reed, you said, it's niche. It's so niche, and I think sometimes, maybe the leagues don't totally realize that. They're so caught up in football ops and everything, you kind of forget, like, hey, how many people are actually watching what we do? So I think a leading reason as to why this merger is even being discussed is because, and again, Anthony said it already, but they, would be able to put all the games of this combined league onto, bigger platforms, and you don't have to deal with, again, FX, ESPN2, things like that, where, it's just, you're going to be able to get the product in front of more eyes. And we all know how much, viewership and TV ratings, can determine the survival of these leagues outside of the biggest glaring topic, or perhaps issue in some cases, which is finances. I mean, that's in every football league, in every aspect of those operations. It's all about how much money do you have, and how are you spending it, and where does it go, and what does the budget look like. So that, I think, is a positive. If you merge the two leagues together, you will be able to get a better overall TV deal, and you will be able to get whatever product is put together in front of more people, which I think is good. But the main negative I see from this merger is, if they're trying to do this for 2024, which is what the report has stated, doing that with all 16 teams between two leagues, to me, seems impossible. And even if they wanted to have 16 teams in 2025, I don't know. That also seems very far-fetched to me. And you have to keep in mind, because the USFL has stuck to their hub format for the past 2 seasons, I understand they have expanded the hubs into different cities, but they are not, in all of their home markets yet. I don't see how that would work out, where they would be able to get all those existing teams that don't have, a home stadium into their markets, by 2024, even past that. I mean, I think the USFL was pretty firm on sticking to their hubs for the 2024 season, even though that was against what a lot of people wanted. And then, so what you ultimately come to, once you've determined all that, is it's two things. It's, I think, we can all agree that it's not going to be a 16-team league in the merger. My educated guess would be that there's 12 teams. And to be honest, there could be even less. There could be 10, or maybe if they're really being frugal, they just go to 8 and they figure out, which markets are the best between, where they've already been. But, personally, I think this is a 12-team league. I think you're going to cut some teams, and the ones that are going to be cut are, ones that, either don't have a home or are in a competing market like Houston. I was talking yesterday about how, I think the Gamblers in this situation would be the team, that gets axed because they don't have an existing presence in the city of Houston. I understand there is a historical element there, that the Gamblers were in Houston in the 1980s, but I highly doubt anybody in Houston, is really involved with the Gamblers because they weren't playing there. With the Roughnecks, at least you've had 2 seasons between 2020 and 2023 of established brand familiarity, and while I understand that, the Roughnecks are moving stadium, they're going over to Rice next year from what we've been hearing, due to renovation. So they don't necessarily have a place locked down either. I still feel like the Roughnecks are safe. I mean, again, people might not want to hear this, but I think, again, based off everything I've seen and everything that I've looked at, there are more USFL teams here at risk. Now, the Vipers, yeah, I don't know about the Vipers. They're exploring their options, Arizona, Tennessee. I don't know. We don't know a whole lot about that. That in itself, there's a lot of uncertainty about that franchise moving forward, just like there's a lot of uncertainty about this merger, happening and what the details are going to look like. But the USFL, again, you go back to their hub format, and the fact that they haven't, even 2 years into the league's existence, have not been able to get each individual team into their home market, in a merger situation where the other league has already been, in home markets for a year, and you still have, again, in the USFL, teams that are going on year 3 and they still don't have a place to play in their designated city, that puts the USFL at a real disadvantage here. And I would not be surprised if, I understand that the most equal way to do this in a merger that involved 12 teams would be to get rid of 2 XFL and 2 USFL. But something tells me that, again, despite whatever's going on, that the USFL teams are more at risk. Even the ones that do have, that have played in their home market. I look at Michigan. I think, they were in Ford Field, which, given the fan reception, that the USFL has and their, unfortunate lack to fill certain stadiums, I don't know what happens to Michigan. And then obviously the teams that don't have a home, like the Breakers, I could see, going away because they haven't played in New Orleans. There's this whole situation, again, that was obviously weird in the USFL last year, but even weirder now in a merger where USFL has this huge focus on Canton, but never actually established a team there. So that puts, Pittsburgh and New Jersey, I think, at risk because, again, neither of those teams have gotten into a home market. Do you scrap the Canton hub entirely, or do you somehow merge Pittsburgh and New Jersey into one entity so you could play them in Ohio? Again, all these questions, that we're going to have, there's a lot to break down. But again, for me, one of the glaring things here is what's going to happen to some of these teams. And I feel like, again, the USFL, because they were hesitant to move, into designated markets because of their budget, I don't know, that might mean that a lot of the USFL teams that we've seen might not be around. And again, I understand not every XFL market is great either. I want to be fair here. I understand, Vegas didn't work out. Clearly, it looks like they're not going back there, barring some, last minute miracle, or, if they can't get in anywhere else. I understand, all the XFL markets aren't great, but when you've at least been in a city for a year and you have some brand familiarity, I think that means you're a bit safe, as opposed to, bringing in a team like in the USFL where, say like, the Houston Gamblers. It's like, okay, but the Gamblers have never played in Houston. So it would be very strange to bring a team there, and maybe perhaps, well, I'm not saying, again, I don't think the Roughnecks are going anywhere. But to bring a team in there and get rid of another one where there's already an established presence, that just doesn't make much sense to me. So that's one of the roadblocks you run into with this, with all of this. And that's the most glaring issue to me. Again, I've got a lot of other thoughts, but I'd say merging leagues for a TV deal would be the biggest positive, but the biggest negative is you are probably going to get rid of some teams. And obviously what that means is guys are going to be put out of a job. If you take away 4 teams, from this new league, well, that's 4 rosters and 4 coaching staffs that are just kind of left saying, hey, if this merger is supposed to be a benefit and we're supposed to, be keeping spring football alive for a couple more seasons, how is that a benefit if I'm out of a job and I'm not able to make money doing football? So now this is a separate conversation where, for me as a football personnel guy,
let's get into that in a minute here. We got a lot of stuff.
All right, I got it.
It's gonna be a long night. It's gonna be a long night.
No, but it'll be a long night.
And David brings that up. He says here, thanks for the special coverage. My first honest instinct is worried about the health of the leagues and concerns for, that was one of the first things that came out. Like, hey, USFL, they got their CBA, as a union. Are they going to be happy with, losing these teams? A couple of just quick things. I did like this. It's a no-brainer maybe to move the Gamblers to Vegas. That's almost too tongue-in-cheek. Will talking about moving the Portland Breakers. I tell you, the New Orleans Breakers go away. There's a small child crying somewhere in the basement, wherever that takes place. We're curious about that. The interesting thing, and I'm going to get Anthony's thoughts on this. Mike's already talking about that in the group chat. I don't know if he's reported that, like whatever, but at least in the group that, hey, get used, and we're going to get Mike on here. He's, wrapping up. Get used to like an April kickoff, because we're talking like, hey, we got a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time, right? We got February. If they push everything right, obviously that gives them another 3 months. What do you make of that in terms of extending, maybe kicking the can down, giving them some more time to get this all figured out?
Man, that it's so tough, because I think the players benefit better from a February through May schedule because they have more time to heal up their bodies. They have time to sign with, NFL teams. They have time, time to go to mini camps and get tryouts. With the USFL schedule, you're running from April through July, and that can be a challenge on trying to get it onto an NFL roster, especially right before training camp. At the same time, weather is going to be better. I think television ratings is going to be better. Look, you won't have to compete with March Madness. We saw the impact that college basketball's March Madness had on the XFL, how bad the ratings were that weekend. It was the worst weekend of ratings when they had to compete with it. And then you have games like on a Thursday night, you're watching Seattle and Houston at 9:30 at night, and you have fans staying up till 12, 1 o'clock trying to watch a game. Like, that doesn't logistically make sense. I think from a television rating perspective, the league has a much better chance of winning the ratings battle if they're in the summer, because there's not going to be any new episodes of TV shows. You're only really competing with Major League Baseball. You might have to compete with like the NBA playoffs and stuff like that. But from a television perspective, I think it's better to do April through July. I think you have a better chance of winning in that aspect. But I think you put the players in a position where they don't have time to heal up before training camp, and they're going to take more of a beating. So there may be less of a chance for them to make an NFL roster. I mean, we've already seen the impact. We've seen more XFL players get signed than USFL players this year because the XFL finished their season early, and NFL teams got off to a fast start signing them right at the beginning of May. So we saw an impact on that aspect. But then again, if you're going to play these teams in colder weather conditions, you probably want to play in the summer. You probably don't want to play, February through May, because you have a shot at, what if you have a team in Philadelphia, if you have a team in Canton and Detroit, whatever it is, you're going to run into some bad weather through it. So I don't know. I'm very split on it. I don't like the USFL schedule, but if they want to win the television battle, I think it's better to do it April through the summer.
I like, and we've talked about this. I mean, it really is like two sides of the same coin. I think with them both having different positives to bring to this, right? Where the XFL has some of the established fan bases, as much as we want to tout like the trademarks that the USFL owns. Like, I think the Battle Hawks in 2023 carry a little bit more cachet than owning, like we've said, like the Houston Gamblers kind of trademarks or whatever with that. Quick before I forget, we have almost 100 people watching on the YouTube here, and the people on Twitter and everything else. Like, just make sure you give it a like the video here, and make sure you're subscribed. Just appreciate that. But we got good viewership here on a Wednesday. Wasn't sure how this would turn out. But yeah, if everyone could give it a like, and what do they say? Thumbs up, turn on the bell, and all of that. And I did have where was it? Oh, I had, I like to respond to negative comments as well. This Mark guy is going crazy in the chat. I hope it's not Mark Perry under a pseudonym. This kid talking, I assume that's you, Evan, is more on the XFL lost 60 million. The USFL showed a profit. It's whatever the USFL wants to do. Tell me you don't know how startup businesses work without telling me you don't know how startup businesses work. USFL is owned by Fox, who's able to write off a large portion of everything that they do, A, through Fox, B, having their commentators, announcers, TV people, social media people, web people, everybody working, they're already employed by Fox, continuing to do that work for the USFL. XFL hired, what was it, 108? Anthony, what was the number they had when they had the big town hall of how many people they had? Like 800 people they had hired over the course of the year?
Yeah, something like that.
Hiring 800 people, starting establishing so get out of here with that nonsense. The USFL lost money too. They just know how to kind of, it's not cooking the books, but it's like, I had to go film yesterday and get some money. Like, I'm able to charge my parking and expense it to the company because I'm doing it for work. Like, just get out of here with that. I'm really tired of like the XFL lost 60 million. I'm like, that's some sort of like blight on the earth. Evan, we'll toss back to you. Any thoughts on that or any other continuation?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I don't know. I mean, look, man, comment like that. I mean, again, I said earlier, it's not about USFL saving the XFL or XFL saving the USFL. Don't know why that's so difficult to get through people's heads. Like, again, and I've also said before, don't focus so much on that 60 million number. Okay, I understand it's important. I understand it might mean more to some people than others, but like at the end of the day, it's a number. You know, I've said before, I never thought that was going to affect the league too much going into 2024, and I still don't. You know, even with these merger talks, it might change some things a bit in the way that they go about things, but XFL's handling that, and life goes on. What I was going to point out earlier, what I want to get back into, you know, I'll briefly touch on the schedule here too. I think the February to May schedule is probably the best option. You know, again, you give more guys time the rest of the summer to go on to the NFL. And, you know, even for other leagues, like I work in arena football, you know, our season goes through July. So you want to, you know, play outdoor ball, and then you still want to do something after, you know, come mid-season if there's a spot, and you know, stay healthy, whatever. And then obviously CFL season starts in June. So some guys, you know, maybe depending on how the contract clauses work, you know, can go from one of those leagues here in the US, you know, to the CFL. I mean, I understand, you know, this might not be a direct example, but like Darnell Sankey, who played in the XFL with Arlington this season, is back in the CFL now, signed with Montreal. Now, obviously that was much later. He just signed like last week, you know, and the XFL season ended in May. But you get my point. Like if there's still guys, you know, that come down from Canada to play in these leagues, maybe there's still an option for them, you know, if they finish in May, to go back up there and play another full CFL season, depending on how the contract clauses work and if they are granted a release to go do that. The other thing that I'll touch on here too, you know, talking about, you know, other leagues and how this kind of connects. You know, for people who don't know, I do football personnel work in the IFL with the Vegas Nighthawks, arena football. And, you know, I've gotten questions, you know, from people about, you know, how this affects, you know, what I do. And, you know, I think about, if the league goes to 12 teams and there are 4 teams, you know, that don't exist anymore, for lack of a better term, you will be able to get, you know, I guess it's a benefit for me in a sense, because I will be able to, you know, I have an opportunity to bring some of those guys in. You don't know who's going to be available, right? But you have an opportunity, if you like some of those guys, you know, that might get left out of this, to bring them in and to come play arena football. You give them another opportunity. But that's not really, you know, that's not really how it should work. I'm not saying, you know, like that's obviously, it makes it easier for me, but in the reality, like taking, you know, opportunities away from guys is going to be a very difficult challenge if, you know, they do downsize, which I think is going to happen. And then, you know, the other thing I think about from the football sort of personnel perspective is, you know, this is something, again, it's not really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, but I know I thought about it, you know, kind of off the jump yesterday when I first saw the news. Was the IFL has a partnership with the XFL, and it's a rather quiet partnership, but it is one, you know, that has developed. And I was at the combine between these two leagues in August, you know, in Vegas, the IFL XFL combine. And that event, you know, there were a lot of people there, but ultimately it was a success. And I think it was one of the first major things that these two leagues did to really, you know, make it be known that that partnership does exist. Because again, a lot of people weren't, you know, cued in on that. And I understand, again, this isn't probably something a lot of people are thinking about in the bigger picture, but I would say it's important because, you know, from that combine, there were several IFL players that were picked up, you know, by the XFL. One of the most notable being, you know, MVP TJ Edwards, the quarterback from the Frisco Fighters, who was picked up by the San Antonio Brahmas. So I guess my biggest question, you know, on the personnel side now is like, if the XFL and USFL were to merge, aside from the whole number of teams debate, is, you know, would that partnership still exist, you know, between, you know, our game, which is indoor arena football, and, you know, this, I guess, whatever new version of the outdoor league that we have?
Yeah, I'm just glad that we'll see some real football here in the February. Is really what I'm excited about with all this. I wanted to say here, I had, where's the comment I had? I haven't started. Ryan's talking, you know, National Spring Football League TM. I will say I was mad. I was sitting there last night. How do I get on this? I was sitting there last night and I was thinking, boy, oh boy, I sure wish I wouldn't have abandoned my trademark for the National Spring Football League that I owned for about 6 months until the trademark office emailed me and they're like, so what are your intentions with this trademark? Do you plan on establishing the league? Like, what like, they had this whole litany of questions I had to fill out. And they're like, where are you going to operate out of? And what time of year? And how many coaching personnel? And I'm like, I am not prepared to take this gimmick too far. But I do, if they want to use that name, I think the National Spring Football League would be a good one. Anthony, what do you got here? Coaching staffs? What do you want to talk about? Teams? Do we want to talk about time of year? Do we want to talk about like what name stays? That's kind of my question too. Like, what do we do with the brand?
So let me say, I think the league, look, we have to learn from the mistakes of past spring football leagues. If you look back at the USFL back in the 80s, from season 1 to season 2, they nearly doubled the size of the league, adding all these teams and thinking, oh, well, if we just add more teams, we're going to get more revenue. That's not how business works. And a lot of those teams ended up folding. A lot of them, about the San Antonio gunslinger story where the players were speeding down the highway to try to get to the bank first so they can get their paychecks before the other players try to cash it. So we don't want a situation like that. So I know 16 teams is the sexy number, and even 12 is probably the sexy number. I think if these leagues they merge, the right thing to do is 8 to 10. I know that's not what people want to hear, but if you want spring football to work, we're gonna have to slow this thing down a bit. It doesn't make sense to expand, to keep all the teams and go to 16, because then you're going to run into the same problem you had before, where each of these leagues are trying to figure out the financial part. I hate it for the players. I hate it for the coaches. Obviously, I want all of them to have jobs. I want them to be, have their opportunities. But if spring football is going to work and it's going to work the right way, you have to go a little bit slower. I will give the USFL all the credit in the world. I've always been blunt about this. I absolutely hate the hub city idea. But you know what? They probably are doing a little bit better financially than the XFL. The XFL went all out and wanted to be in the the home stadiums, so they paid a little bit extra of a price. But at the end of the day, I mean, we got to make this league work. And if they merge, I think you start with 8. Maybe you go up to 10 if you feel comfortable in 2024. In terms of who stays and who goes, I don't think the Vipers should exist. Just get rid of them. I think if you look at the Orlando Guardians, I think you got to get rid of them too. They don't have the attendance numbers. I think you got to go off attendance. I mean, whoever were the worst teams in attendance, who are the bottom 2, you get rid of them in the XFL. USFL, obviously, I think the Pittsburgh Maulers should go unless they're going to go to Kenton, Ohio. Trying to think. I mean, New Orleans Breakers, I don't know if they have really connection with anybody. Like, you're going to have to get rid of teams, like, especially, and I don't. It almost feels like it has to be a little bit more on the USFL side, just because they don't have the stadiums. And I hate to say that, because there's actually a lot of, I think there's more pull with the names that are in the USFL than the XFL, but they don't have stadiums. And I think you got to go off the ones that have the stadiums, have the fan base. You got to follow where the money is. And a lot of the teams in the USFL simply don't. I mean, they have to lean heavily on Memphis. They have to, lean heavily on Birmingham. They have to lean heavily on Detroit to step up and, make the profit for the leagues. So, and the one comment about the losing 60 million, I mean, the USFL, it's kind of hard to lose 60 million if you're not really making that much money in the first place, because you're not getting fans in the stadium anyway. So let's just make that comment. They're not really making the money to lose 60 million. So let's just leave it at that. But I mean, my thing is, if we want to make this merger right, if we want to do it the right way, we're going to have to do a slow progression with this thing. So it's got to be maximum 10 teams. If you do anything over that, I think you're just going back to square one with the same problem you had before, and you're going to go through financial issues.
I'm curious, and I want to get, well, there's a lot here, but like, it's just because you're talking like, okay, get rid of the Guardians, right? I mean, that's just like the knee jerk, like, get rid of the Guardians. Like, Corey, their ticket sales guy, has been on TikTok. Like, what do you do? I mean, I understand that it's like, and this goes for any USFL team or the Vipers or anybody. Like, well, that wasn't a big fan base. Like, yes, I mean, it's still, Vegas had 6,000 people coming out. Like, there's people that were working there. Like, it's just like, it's just such a weird time to do this here, where like we're already having the season tickets. I mean, there's no like really good reason. Like, there's no real good timing to kind of pull the plug on this. But I don't know if we make an announcement like XFL and USFL are going to finish this season, and then look, and maybe that will be the announcement that comes out, and we'll look forward to, reevaluating at the end of this season. So then you don't have people like buying season tickets into the next year, because I just don't know. I don't know what you do how you kind of resolve that. We have our other guest standing by here. You could listen to him later, or you could watch him live and interact with him now. I appreciate this very much. Mike, how the heck are you? Mike, can you hear us? You can't hear us. All right, Mike.
Can't hear you guys. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
I can't hear you guys at all.
Okay. Well, let's. I can't. I'll text with Mike here. Evan, you talk, and I'll text with Mike.
All right. Well, I'll touch on the branding for a bit. I think we've already gone over, what cities might not be there, what markets are better than others for both leagues. One of the fun ideas I had for branding, and again, this is an extremely hypothetical one, but people who know me know that I was a big fan of the Spring League, TSL, which is really the springboard, I think, for USFL. That was Brian Woods' project and everything. I was a big fan of TSL and their teams and their branding and everything like that. Even the General's name, from TSL was revived in the USFL or carried over as the New Jersey Generals. I like the TSL brand, very simple, the Spring League. It doesn't, you see all this crap that's being spewed about USXFL. And, I'm like, all right, guys, like we all know it's not going to be that. I think if they merge, there's going to be a fresh rebrand, even, I don't even know, you could carry one of the existing names, right? Like maybe you retain the USFL name, you retain the XFL name, just get rid of the other one. But of course, then that creates another debate. And then it's, this is trying to be an equal merger, but unfortunately, a lot of this stuff that we've been discussing, might not be very fair or equal. Like, again, if they just get rid of 4 teams and say goodbye, like, sorry, this didn't work out. Some people are going to feel like they were cheated on. They put in a lot of hard work and effort on both sides. And, it might just, unfortunately, if this merger does go through the way we think it will, or at least, a full version or whatever, it might, some people are going to get left out. People will lose jobs. And I think, it's very ironic to me because, the XFL calls themselves the League of Opportunity. Their entire brand has been about, giving players opportunities, whether it be, in their own league, moving up to the NFL level. Obviously, that was a big talking point. But, it would be very unfortunate if they, again, we've talked about XFL marketing. That's a separate discussion, right? But it would be very interesting if, the XFL USFL merged, XFL, calls themselves, the League of Opportunity, and then proceeds to put a bunch of guys out of jobs. That's, right now, I don't really see a way around that. So I don't know. Again, there's a lot of questions and a lot of hypotheticals. Everything we're talking about isn't concrete. And you have to keep in mind throughout this stream, I said it at the top of the show, but I'll say it again, at the end of the day, these are still all rumors. There's been some talks, but it doesn't mean anything has been finalized. There's not much concrete evidence. We do think that something will happen. At least I am a believer because, again, some of the things that were laid out in that article, they seem concrete, right? That they seem, believable. They don't seem, random or, just some guy trying to make up something for clicks. There is some believable evidence there. And again, we can all agree, while we didn't think, something like this would be discussed this early. I feel like everybody in the back of their mind just always wonders, what if these 2 leagues merged, and we've joked about it at times, even, had some very lighthearted discussions. But, and again, to people who maybe aren't as cued in on the subject, USFL and XFL are virtually the same thing for them anyway. So to them, it's like, well, what's the big deal? We're sitting here freaking out on the stream and I'm, spewing out all these hypotheticals and, things that we think could happen, when in reality, most people are looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about? People can't even, even at the NFL level, there were so many times, you saw, Schefter and Rappaport, I think, do it a couple times in their tweets where it was like, Vikings sign, USFL standout running back Abram Smith, and everyone's like, "Oh, great!" And then we're like, "Well, hold on a minute, that's the wrong league, getting the wrong idea." So, things like that. Again, this just goes to prove the point that it's super niche, and it might seem crazy for us to be saying some of these things when really one article came out and a couple of things have been piggybacked off that, and of course, neither league has commented on it. For obvious reasons. Again, it's a very highly sensitive subject, something like that. And again, I put it out on Twitter. But if this is true, and if this is something that is really possible for 2024, but even beyond that, even if it was 2025, this would be the biggest development in spring football. And, you know, I'm not completely against it. As I've pointed out, I think it is easier to follow one league and to just kind of, you know, have everything together. And it will make it easier, again, for the casual fan, you know, someone who's not us, who isn't, you know, living and breathing these leagues all the time, to just follow the one entity and have that entity on, you know, larger major networks. Again, just makes the fan experience a bit, you know, less of a pain if you're not, you know, somebody who's a complete nerd like myself. But you know, ultimately there's just so many logistics that you have to get through, and I just can't imagine, like, there's going to be so much work that needs to be done on so many elements. We focused on some of the more outstanding ones, some of the more glaring issues that would need to be solved immediately, but I think there's a lot of things where even if these teams merged and they played things out as a merger, where they would discover certain things throughout the course of this new season with the two leagues together, where it's like, hey, maybe we need to figure this out, or this wasn't something we thought through, you know, before the merger, and well, that could potentially create some problems down the line as well.
Let me bring on here. I think we got this figured out here. We got over 100, 110 people watching. We got our XFL insider here, Mike Mitchell. Mike can hear us, I believe. Like I said, like and subscribe. Thumbs up the video. Make sure you're subscribed here. Mike comes on the bunch. I appreciate him joining us live here, answering some questions. Mike, I'm sure your phone has melted in your hand over the last 2 days. How's everything going?
Everything's all right. My head's spinning. Good to see you guys. I know this is a hot topic right now. There's just so much to go over. Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. The most fascinating part of this to me is how in the dark everybody is on the USFL and XFL side. Only the bigwigs know about this. Every coach that I've talked to, offensive coordinators, assistants, personnel people, directors of player personnel, GMs, they're waiting to be briefed. They're waiting for the top big dog executives to tell them what's going on, because they don't know what's going on. And it's a little bit fearful, you know, like the fun side of this is the possibility of this like super spring pro football league that comes together, major networks, does all these things. But the scary side is that the real possibility that a lot of jobs could be lost, that we could be talking about going from 16 spring pro football league teams to 10. And then, so there's really like, there's that fear that would be a lot of jobs that are lost in this space. So while as a fan, this is like fan fiction for us, you know, it's like something hard to believe. It's like DC and Marvel getting together kind of thing, you know, like Superman and Hulk doing a movie together. So it's like, but it's for us nerds, it's like that. Right. But the possibility of this, I keep hearing the term consolidated league, where you have maybe 4 on one side that emerge and stick around, and maybe 6 teams on the other side that stick around. And like, so could be fun with everybody in their markets and all that, but it's also a shame to say goodbye to they won't say it in the press release. The Stars and the Generals are going on pause. The Panthers are going on pause. That's what they'll say is the pause thing. They won't say they're going. Nobody wants to hear that. There's going to be quite a bit of backlash here. If we get to the point where there's no Michigan Panthers, there's no Houston Roughnecks. There's a little bit of some scary scenarios. And right now, a lot of it is rumors and speculation. But could you imagine AJ Smith, the offensive coordinator of the Houston Gamblers? I'm not like, honestly, so I hate getting into rumors and speculation, but from all the crazy stuff I've been hearing, don't rule it out. So, I mean, like I know that sounds really ridiculous, but like to try to contemplate that. But right now, basically, we're in this situation because I've said this a million times before, and I'm privy to all this stuff because I actually talked to people. I was surprised that Moose Johnson came out and said he was disappointed with the attendance in Birmingham, that he was disappointed with the ratings for the league. I know for a fact the XFL would never want to make this public, but that's why I'm here. They were disappointed that they didn't reach their revenue markers in 2023. That was Russ Brandon had a conference call with all the employees to explain why they were going from full-time employees to seasonal. And the reasoning behind it was they didn't reach their revenue markers. They thought they were going to do better. So the way this all worked out is there are key people in the USFL side of things up the ladder on the football side and on the XFL side as well that have close relationships with individuals on the other side. And they suggested the possibility of a merger of the two leagues coming together. And then they pitched it upstairs to the big bosses. And then this thing accelerated because I thought it was just going to be exploratory talks, preliminary stuff. I'm thinking 2025, maybe if people can set aside egos. So the fact that there are news outlets saying that this is imminent, this is going to happen, it's very close, it's mind-boggling to me. Like, I'm still in disbelief that we're even close to this happening so quickly. What is Mike Mitchell hearing, right? So I'll just tell you what I'm hearing. I hate doing this, but 10 teams, April start, Fox, NBC games, ABC games, 10 teams, 5 games a week. You'd have a game on ABC. You'd have the rest of the games on Fox and NBC. 10 the teams that I've been hearing, I'm going to get in trouble for even going out of the limb and saying all this, but the teams I've been hearing are Birmingham Stallions, Memphis, an Ohio-based team with the Generals, the Stars, the Panthers, the Breakers, all going by the wayside, and the Houston Gamblers surviving on the USFL side. And then on the XFL side, I'm hearing that the Roughnecks and the Vipers may not be a part of this merger. So that is scary. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to say goodbye to the Roughnecks. And so what do you do about these coaching staffs? What do you do about Anthony Blevins, who's just hired? He left an NFL job. It's not a guy who's about to get fired. It's not a guy who got let go from his staff. He left an NFL job with the Giants, a sitting job, to become a head coach in the XFL. Takes the Vipers job. What if there's no Vipers? Where is he going to end up? So that's a really unfortunate side of this. So while the fun fan fiction stuff of like, oh my God, how cool is this USFL versus XFL, and them being together as one league, joining powers, it's fun. The negative side is you're not going to be able to make everybody happy here. There's going to be backlash with XFL and USFL fans that are upset, and then there's going to be there's going to be people who lose jobs, which is the tough part of this. In a perfect world, if it were me, if they were listening to me, and it's easy for me to say because I'm not putting in the money, but I'd have a 16-team league where you'd have the USFL still in existence, the XFL still in existence, some interconference games. They play the seasons at the same time. End of the season, the XFL champion plays the USFL champion, whatever it is, Renegade Stallions, Battlehawk Stallions, whoever it is. That's how I would do it. But I'm not in charge here. I don't call the shots. And this is a business decision. Make no mistake about it. This whole thing is a business thing. We could get into a scenario where the USFL side, Fox saves money because they don't have to fund as many teams. The XFL side saves money because they don't have to fund as many teams. They split the costs and expenses. They're all in a hub in Arlington. How crazy would that be next year with Anthony out there in Arlington watching the Stallions practice with the Renegades or something like that? It'd be just like bizarro world stuff. So it's like, so right now we're like, it's very difficult to believe. Like, we live the XFL CFL stuff, so we're almost waiting for a snag to hit here because it just doesn't seem real. I don't want to use the term doesn't seem right, but it just doesn't seem real at the moment. We're going to find out shortly enough. The XFL has a draft supposedly on October 4th. If you're going to announce a merger between both leagues with all these teams coming together, are the Stallions drafting behind the Defenders in the draft order? How are we working this?
Reed, if you don't mind, Reed, out of curiosity, Mike, I'm really interested because you said Gamblers over Roughnecks. Why the Gamblers when they don't? To me, they don't have the fan. I mean, they may still have the fans at the end of the day because it's still football in Houston. But I feel like they're more connected to the Roughnecks. So
it would not be my choice. It would not be my choice. Like, there's no disrespect to the Gamblers. I understand that they're going back 4 decades, 40 years. But this recent iteration of the Gamblers doesn't play in Houston. The Roughnecks actually have, I hate to put it this way because people think I'm being a homer or something. The Roughnecks actually have fans in that city, whereas the Gamblers, I don't know, there are very many Gambler fans in Houston. I'm sorry. I'm not from Houston, but the Roughnecks have actually, they built something the last few years there. So, yes, Anthony, I'm not saying 100% that the Roughnecks are not going to be part of the league, but I got to tell you, that's what I've been hearing. And I understand right now because there's only a select few people, Russ Brandon, Mark Ross, Doug Whaley, Eric Shanks, Moose Johnson. There's only a select few people right now that know this stuff. They're happy that finally something didn't get out. They were very upset that I'm sending, company-wide emails publicly on social media as directly from the president to the employees. They're not happy about that kind of stuff. So they're happy that they're able to keep this close knit and quiet to the point where I've got people on the teams contacting me, asking me what's going to happen. What have you heard? I got that from coach on the Dragons. I've gotten that from coach on the Roughnecks. I got that from a GM in the USFL, a recently hired one. So, I mean, a lot of people are asking questions because they don't know. They've been kept in the dark on this. So Roughnecks over the Gamblers. This is not me picking one league over the other. I'd rather have the Roughnecks franchise than the Gamblers. So that's a question in a press conference. Whenever this press release comes out, they'd have to explain that one. They can get all cutesy in a PR thing and say teams are on pause and we're doing this to build for the future. And all these great franchises will be back along with the dead bandits. So, I mean, the semi-dead bandits. So that's kind of the story there. It is surprising when I heard that. It just doesn't make sense to me. I even had people today call in to question the future of the Birmingham Stallions in this merged league because their contract with the USFL runs out after 3 years, and because there was disappointment on how they drew fans there and the cost issues in relation to there. So this is just bizarro world, like right now, like trying to wrap my head around all this stuff. And normally I don't go forward with a lot of this stuff, but I just want to tell you guys what people are saying in these leagues to me and what I'm hearing. I don't have any of that stuff confirmed, but I keep hearing that, like I said, 10 teams, April start, and certain teams going by the wayside. You're going to have backlash on all sides on this. I know that people mock the USFL teams that are not playing in their cities, but like if all of a sudden the Stars are gone and all that, you're going to have a lot of people upset that those teams are gone. I'm sorry. It may be a small majority, but there's going to be a group out there that roots for the Breakers. And then what happens to all these great players? Now you got to figure like a Mark Thompson, a McLeod Bethel Thompson, Wes Hills, all these guys will end up somewhere. They're too talented not to end up on a team if their teams are no. Like the Stars are announcing re-signing Luis Aguilar. We just, I think Sam just had an article about that recently. And that's awesome. What if they're in a week from now, they're not in existence for 2024? That would be very awkward, strange, weird. So, and I would be extremely disappointed. The whole idea of this whole merger to me is like, oh, cool. Everybody goes in their markets. So like selfishly, I want to see the Generals go into the tri-state area. So I'm like, oh yes, cool. I don't care where they play. The parking lot in New Jersey, I don't care less. But as long as they're like in that general tri-state area rather than playing in Ohio. So part of me is like, oh, cool. They're going to get a little bit of that XFL rub and put these teams in their markets that should be in their markets. No Breakers should be in New Orleans, etc. But so we're going to see how this is handled. But make no mistake about it. This is like everything they're doing is business related. On both sides, they both don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And there's no guarantee that if these are separate entities that we see the USFL last beyond another season or two. And there's no guarantee that the XFL, because the XFL is adopting a lot of what the USFL has done. You know, they're now all of a sudden, the coordinators and the head coaches are supposed to be under 2-year deals, but all the assistants are being told, okay, you're going to be laid off. You have to file for unemployment. You're going on.
Did Mike freeze there?
Looks like it.
Yeah.
Hey, Evan, let's get Mike back on. Let's get your reactions to the Roughnecks, because I know that's the team that you cover potentially. And again, this is, I trust Mike's sources, but, Roughnecks not be involved in this. Let's get your reaction. I'll try to get Mike back on.
Well, it would be an extremely surprising development, to say the least. I would be extremely disappointed, for one, if the Roughnecks left. But at the same time, I understand there's a lot of uncertainty, and I understand that, business is business, right? I just think the one thing that I thought about when Mike said that about, Gamblers maybe being there over the Roughnecks was Wade Phillips, our coach in Houston, once said that he wouldn't want to coach for the Gamblers because they didn't play in Houston. So would be kind of awkward if there was a, transition where the Roughnecks weren't there anymore and the Gamblers became the team in Houston, which, keep in mind, Wade Phillips in Houston, that connection is he's one of the most well-respected people in that entire city and market. So, man, that would be something. That's a lot to process immediately. I won't, I understand it's all speculation. Nothing's concrete, but yeah.
Yeah, with this, I can't believe it either when I was told this. With this setup, the Gamblers would play at Rice, so they would be in Houston. It doesn't really make it doesn't honestly, it's not the choice I would have made. And like I said, I would have all 16 teams there, but that's maybe the football fan in me. So I'm not saying that the Roughnecks are dead here, but I'm just telling you what I'm just the messenger here. This is
Absolutely.
the stuff. This is the stuff that I'm hearing. Like it's there's going to be some backlash here. Like, what rules do you adopt? Well, you know, I keep hearing that the NFL really likes the XFL kickoff. So if the merger happens, the XFL kickoff will stay. But there's a lot of XFL coaches that like the USFL rules. They like the ability to kick an extra point. They want to be able to do a 2-point conversion from the 2-yard line rather than whatever from the 5. So there's some aspects of it that they would like to, that XFL side would like to keep from the USFL side. And so I think I didn't even bring up the other stuff. The other stuff was the talk of the XFL brand not existing anymore, the USFL brand not existing anymore, and that the league becomes a whole new name. So and that, my friends, is another backlash because the XFL has built up brand equity, love it or hate it, new paint jobs from 2001, and the USFL has spent the last 2 years building up their brand entity. So I think it's a mistake if they all of a sudden become the National Spring Football League, go NSFL. I think you're really doing damage to your own identity, your brand identities there. I think people want that NWO, WCW, that kind of like Marvel DC thing. They want that. I think WWE, WCW kind of thing. I think that people want to kind of keep that while the two leagues merge together. So how you figure that out, I don't know. But there's as happy as we are as a potential merger, there's going to be some blowback and potential backlash if certain things come into play, which I don't know them for 100% to be. But when I've been hearing some of this stuff, it hasn't exactly like tickled my fancy, for lack of a better term, like some of the possibilities here, especially the part about like 200, 300 player jobs being gone.
I want to get Mike's, and then we'll toss to Anthony here. One more question. I'm going to go get some water. I'm going to listen here. I want to know what, like, when you're talking to the XFL people, you're talking to you, because all right, this is all coming out of nowhere, right? And like, you said it's just a couple, and is it panic in the XFL side? Because like I've messaged a couple of people, but I've been working, and like I certainly don't have the connections you have. Like, are they like, oh my god, the world's burning? Are they excited? I mean, I'm sure it varies from person to person, but overall, like, are we excited? Is this a new venture? Are we like, man, this is the last ditch effort? Like, we're trying to figure this out.
I've been in contact with it's been differing opinions. I've been in contact with a couple different head coaches that are not exactly excited about this. There's some head coaches that are upset with the XFL for their new system with the assistants, where they're not paying them till they show up for work. So there's some, and then they were sold a lot of like USFL guys who came over to the XFL were sold on the idea that the XFL was going to be like a more superior league, a better run league, all this stuff. And now all of a sudden, to merge with the other side, there's a little bit of a conflict there. There are some personnel guys I spoke to on the flip side that are very excited about this possibility, that love the idea of the league expanding. This is a way of expanding a league without actually expanding it. So to go from an 18 league to 10 or 12 or more, like I said, in a perfect world, I wish it was 16. But it doesn't sound like we're headed that way. How they'll surprise us when the public relations thing go. I don't know how you guys feel about all this stuff, because I'm having a hard time wrapping myself around it. Like, how would you feel, Anthony, if I know you cover the Gamblers, if all of a sudden the Gamblers are the replacement franchise for the Roughnecks in this new merged league?
I mean, so I think, Mike, what you said about like having 10 teams starting in April, I actually think that's perfect. I know that sucks because it's going to mean a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. But before you had hopped on, I had mentioned that I think if we want this thing to actually work the right way, they're going to have to start small. They're going to have to start with 8 to 10 teams, because I think if you try to push for 12, 14, 16, you're going to run into the same problem you had before, where you're struggling financially. So yeah, perfect world, we'd love to have 16 teams, but both leagues will still have the same problem. They have to financially support these teams, and they can't do it. So 10 is the perfect number. I can't wrap my head around like Gamblers over Roughnecks. I guess I can kind of get it. I mean, there's more historic.
Wouldn't be my
like,
choice. Wouldn't be my choice.
yeah, I mean, there's more historic, name brand behind Gamblers over Roughnecks. But again, like we talked about, people are more connected to the Roughnecks over the last 3-4 years in Houston than they are with the Gamblers. And I mean, and honestly, I feel bad for Curtis Johnson. He's done a fantastic job as a head coach, but we all know he's going to get replaced with Wade Phillips. So, and AJ Smith definitely going to be the offensive coordinator. So there's a lot of good people on that Gamblers coaching staff who actually did a lot better job than I thought they were going to. Got into 5-5 last year with a team that was pretty awful back in 2022, and they were able to kind of flip that franchise to being a competitive team. So unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of coaches that are going to be lost out of that. But you got to think like the Roughnecks coaching staff is probably a little bit stronger, so they would probably go with them. But I don't know. I mean, it's wild. I mean, it's just wild to think about, like the Gamblers.
I'm hoping
I'm there over the Roughnecks.
Yeah, I would. It was me personally. Unless you're putting the Gamblers in Austin or something like that, I would ride with the Roughnecks. I know some people would think that's like some kind of homer choice, but that would be my choice. I dig like the Gamblers logo and their colors, and I get the history. And there's so many good players on there, on that current team and all that. But maybe if Mark Thompson was on AJ Smith's offense, he'd actually run the ball. Maybe. So a few times at least. But yeah, so I mean, when they announced this, I think there's a chance it's going to get a lot of positive feedback from the mainstream crowd, the casual crowd that's not like us, who's into these leagues and pays attention to every little thing. They're going to say, wow, that's so cool, those two leagues merged. But for us hardcores, it's going to be tough to see certain franchises not be back. And all that. So, and it could create, you might have USFL fans go, why the hell? I wish this never happened. You might have XFL fans go, I wish this merger never happened. Where's my Breakers at? Or where's my Roughnecks or whatever. So, hopefully they handle this correctly. I got to say both leagues haven't they've shown a propensity to make some big mistakes, like playing in Ohio, but not having an Ohio team, playing in Vegas and that disaster. So it's not like the judgment calls by the USFL and XFL side has always been sound. So hopefully they make the right calls here with their proposed merger.
Evan, reactions to all this, and I'm glad I didn't make the same mistake I did last year. Remember, Mike, when we were on that Zoom call many years
ago? That was the best. That was interesting. You were draining the sea dragon. Yeah,
luckily we were there recording. Evan, react to all this.
Well, man, if my head wasn't spinning before, it's probably flying off right now. I mean, a lot of information to process right off the bat. Until more comes out and I talk to some people, I'm going to reserve my opinions. I will feel a certain way about it probably. As Mike's pointed out, I hope the right decisions are made. Again, I understand, business is business. We're supposed to be doing things for the greater good of continuing spring football. But I want to go back, just getting off this for a minute. I want to go back to, the football personnel side of things. Because, Mike, I don't think you were here on the stream when I was talking about it. But I pointed out that, there's a couple things here. And maybe I can get your opinion on this, what you might think. I don't know if you even have an answer, but I'll tell you anyway. You obviously, I do stuff in arena football, IFL, player personnel. To me, like I wouldn't want anybody to lose their job. I understand some teams are going to get cut. I mean, geez, if it's 6 teams, to end up getting cut, that's going to be a lot of guys, that are out of a job. So for me, I kind of view that as a benefit because I would be able to, recruit those guys, some of them into the arena game, at least guys that I know, like, you don't know who's going to be available, but I know enough players now to where I feel like, that could be maybe a possibility if those many jobs are lost. So, I would be, I guess, excited about the opportunity to have some of those guys come play. But at the same time, it would suck if they were just, out of a job because of a merger that was, again, supposed to be a positive thing and supposed to be helpful. The other thing that I was talking about earlier was, the partnership between the IFL and XFL, which I understand is a very niche thing, and I'm probably more, cued in on that than anybody because I work in the IFL now. But I just wonder, man, like, what is the future of that going to look like if there's, a merger between those two? And is there still going to be some interest between, a merged pro outdoor football league and the arena game? Because for a long time, arena football up until, other than the CFL, up until the XFL and the USFL have come around in the past couple of years, arena football, I feel like, was kind of one of the only alternative options in the U.S. And I understand that it is a bit of a different game. I'm becoming familiar with myself that now, through doing personnel work. But just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on some of that, what it might look like, for the guys who, because I'm, like you've pointed out already, some of them, some of the really good guys, that get displaced through a merger will get picked up by other teams, in the new version of this league. But, maybe, for, the guys that don't get picked up, I guess my question is, do you think that would help, people like myself in arena football and even in the CFL? I don't think we've really brought in much of a CFL connection.
Absolutely.
But obviously you're tied in with that, and I know you care a lot about the CFL too.
Absolutely. It's funny. I just did an interview before I jumped on with you guys, and I brought that CFL thing. I know there's a lot of CFL fans right now. They're like dreading this, that, oh, wait a minute, the USFL and XFL are merging. But if in fact they're going from 16 teams to 10, that opens up a lot of ready available talent to come up north. And yes, as well, towards the indoor leagues. There's, it's unfortunate, in the States, these players are much rather play in the States and play the NFL style game and be closer to home than go up north in Canada, and make a decent living. I don't know the win bonus structure, what it's going to be like. I know some players in the XFL made close to 90,000 in the 2023 season, like Abram Smith, because of the win bonus structure. I know the average salary in the USFL is $53K. So in the indoor game, the reason why I bring up the money is the indoor game, no one's getting paid that. No one's going to, there might be an exception here or there, but no one's going to get $90,000 or whatever. So yes, it could benefit the XFL and the USFL becoming one and having fewer teams, having 10 teams, 12 teams, 14 teams. That could benefit the CFL and could benefit indoor leagues. It gives you a bigger pool, more players to scout. I know the indoor game is much different. That's awesome to you. I know we've said it a million times in group chat. Congratulations to you, Evan. That's really awesome that you're in that position.
Thank you, man.
Could lead to a lot of. Yeah, they could lead to a lot of things. You never know. Maybe if these leagues are around, maybe one day you're working in personnel for one of the gamblers or whatever. I don't know. We'll see. But anyhow, but yes, it could be beneficial. That's one way of looking at it. So the CFL guys, people who dread the XFL and USFL even existing and then merging together to try to become a superpower, that's the positive side to this potential superpower spring football league, is that if they're not at 16 teams right out the gate, you're going to have a lot of talent. And these CFL teams like my 11-1 Toronto Argonauts are really good at finding American talent. And you can see that with the Javon Leaks and the DeMonte Coxie and all that. So it could benefit some of CFL's teams if they're contracting and consolidating and they have fewer teams in the spring here in America. So, and it could benefit you in the IFL. The more leagues, the merrier. I just don't think Major League Football is going to benefit. I don't believe Frank Murtha and his $50 and a bag of chips budget is going to really, make a dent in this. How can they compete?
Anthony, you had a question for Mike. Otherwise, I'll circle back.
You don't believe in Major League Football, Mike? Like what the hell is
No,
that?
we're not wasting.
I like the name. I like the name. I like the name. Unfortunately, it's hard to believe in those jamborees and the $50 bills and all that stuff.
Is that what that could be the name of this new league? Could be Major League Football. Just saying.
It's not bad. It's not bad, actually. If they could just sell that off, maybe they can finally, MLFB can produce something to this landscape.
This is what's hard for me here to kind of fathom, right? So we have like literally the entire entity of this, like everything about the USFL is tied into these trademarks. We fought over these trademarks. We've got sued over these trademarks. That was my favorite time span ever podcasting about the show. Even more so, I think, than like the merger talks with the CFL was like having Michael Cohen on doing the trademark discussions with the USFL. Like we have all that. Danny and The Rock, and I know it's not like, millions and millions and millions, but 15 million, all the debt, all that stuff, right? We're spending all this money to acquire, like, XFL goes the season, and they're like, RedBird goes, we got to reach out to the USFL. USFL entertains this. Like, that's what I don't get is like, it's easier said than done, when you look at the books at the end of the year and you're like, man, I really thought I was going to do it this way. Now, it just amazes me that we have two sides that were both so bullhard on their, brands and everything. They're like, yeah, let's just do a new thing now. And it's September and we're going to kick off in April.
I was shocked. You're right, Reed. I was really how this all panned out. I know there's a lot of different reports and stories. Really how this all panned out is the two football sides sold it to upper management.
Yeah.
And they sold the idea, like, what if the two football sides came together and said, what if we were together on this? What if we came together? And then then they said, it would be pretty great. And they kind of they said, let's shoot this up the ladder. And so they pitched it up, and then they helped facilitate, and it kind of started off innocently enough, and they helped facilitate the meetings that took place. It wasn't Jerry Cardinals outside of Eric Shank's door knocking, hey dude, you got to help me out, bro. Brahma's attendance wasn't that so great. Or it wasn't like the USFL going over to Jerry Cardinal and RedBird's offices in New York and saying, hey, man, this really sucks, man. We have awesome ticket prices. We give away tickets for free and nobody freaking shows up to our games. We need help here, man. Help us out. So it wasn't that it's not that kind of like one side reaching out with hat in hand kind of thing. It really was, what if we put our leagues together and work together football wise? And then the football guys sold it to the guys upstairs. And then however this worked, they actually sold themselves on the idea. So like, that's the surprising part to me. I thought this would take time.
Yeah, because we all could have told them that this would have been better off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's everybody, for 3 years now could have told them.
And I think financially, we got to remember, like, read the tea leaves on here. We know for a fact, this is documented fact, the USFL, Fox has tried to drum up investment money up to $200 million. They haven't been able to do it. RedBird, and this is, everybody can look this up. This is documented out there for everyone to look up. The XFL, I even published an article about this. They've been looking for investment money. They haven't been able to do it. So they haven't been able to drum up investors. So that leads me to believe, like, how do you make your property more profitable, more viable, more interesting, more sexy? And that leads us to where we're at right now, in terms of this kind of like sexy two worlds meeting, colliding, kind of like, let's merge this, put this together, put our resources together, our exposure together, and build this up, because they see that, like I said, I've said this a million times in the last couple of days, both sides don't see the light at the end of the tunnel where they currently stand, but together they see potential for something bigger and greater. So I want to see them execute the vision, because I'm gotta be honest. There's certain aspects of the USFL and XFL that I have not been impressed with, that they dropped the ball with. It's both sides. So I've been vocal about it a million freaking times. So don't go to Ohio if you're not going to have an Ohio team. Don't go to Vegas. So, I mean, you abandoned the New York Guardians and did all that. You got rid of your best TV market that had the highest rated non-NFL game in history. The New York Guardians did back in 2020. You abandoned that huge TV market, and then you replaced it with a team that had like 4,000 fans, with like broadcasters almost falling off of step ladders, calling the games at Cashman Field with that stupid ass field. So there was nothing more Bush League than that. So they really dropped the ball.
I was told every XFL fan defended the Cashman Field.
Oh.
That's what I was.
It was so funny. I did an XFL Power Rankings article, and I listed Cashman Field as number 9 in my Power Rankings. And then I put pictures in the article of the actual field. And then I told I got heat for this. I said how Bush League the XFL looked. How if you were a casual fan, you turned on, hey, I want to see Josh Gordon, and you saw that garbage setup in Cashman Field, that garbage field. You're like, whoa, this looks like a minor league, because the mainstream thinks these are minor leagues to begin with, like rinky-dink leagues. So that was not a good look. So in more ways than one. So, and then the USFL also has the same element with casual fans. You turn in, you listen, you look. There's no fans in the stands, but you got piped in fake, fake piped in crowd noise that sounds like it's like 100,000 fans in there when there's not a single soul in the stands. So both leagues look low budge on many different aspects. So based on their decision making and execution, how they've handled things, fantasy and gambling, I need to see them execute better than they have. I'm glad they exist. I love these leagues. I watch all the games. I'm a maniac. I write about both these leagues. I'm going to watch every single game and talk about every single game. But I think in order for them to be a success, they need to be able to attract the mainstream. They beyond us crazies. They need to be able to attract the mainstream, the casuals, the people, the football fans who mock these leagues need to start paying attention and showing interest in this league, because that's how you're going to start making money. And so hopefully whatever merger they decide upon is the right call. I got to be honest, like a consolidated, take away these teams, rip away these teams kind of thing. It sounds like more cost cutting to me. It sounds like the USFL and Fox is like, hey, this is great. We only cover the cost for 4 teams. And then the XFL is like, hey, this is great. We only cover the cost for 6 teams. And now we don't have to pay people full time. This is awesome. So it sounds like a lot more cost cutting. Yeah, you guys are really good at survival, but start doing things that make your leagues thrive. So anyway, there goes my rant.
Another question, then we'll figure out what we want to do here. When you on one side, I think you can congratulate both the USFL and the XFL for like pivoting here, right? Like, okay, whatever. And, we harp on here a million times, right? And like, do this or do that. And like, okay, so like we're doing things, right? We're actually pivoting. But do you view this as pivoting or as like freaking out, panicking?
Maybe a little bit of both. I think they're both smart enough to see the short game and the long game. And I think they both see that the long game alone is not promising based on the current results. And so I think that they see this as a necessary. The USFL was so disappointed in year 2. Like they really thought them coming back for year 2 was enough proof.
I was told it was the best. I was told it was the best.
Their ratings went down completely across the board. Their attendance went down in Birmingham, a market that they shouldn't have gone in. They paid a lot of rent at Ford Field, and that was a disaster, having like 70, 80, 100 fans. And, and I know that there's the Bill Shays and all those guys who tried to paint a different picture because they were trying to get favoritism with a certain league. But, they're really, and then the evidence of proof will be in the pudding if this merger happens and there's no Michigan Panthers, how they felt that Ford Field thing turned out. So that's kind of the story there. But I do think I wouldn't say panic, but I think it's like reading the tea leaves. I think both sides understand, that in order for them to thrive, they're going to have to do something grander or bigger, because it was stagnant for the USFL in year 2, and the XFL underperformed for what their expectation level was. They did really well 18-49, which was like something they waved the flag for. I get that, and that's important. That's the key demo for advertisers, and they were ranked very high there. But their attendance was very good with DC and St. Louis, but we knew that was going to happen because they inherited that from 2020. So, and they didn't really do a good job promoting. San Antonio was a disappointment. Orlando was a disappointment. Arlington didn't do as well as it should have. I feel you're the hub site. You probably should do better. I know Taylor Swift kicked their ass during one of those games, where she had many people come out to see her, rightfully so. But anyhow, I feel like these 2 leagues underperformed, and they can reading the tea leaves. There's a big question whether or not the public has an appetite for these leagues and even cares about them existing. They've been brushed off. There's not a lot of people came back to watch the USFL product, and the people that did sample the XFL product, they were like, yeah, this is okay. This is all right. And so it wasn't really attracting the mainstream or the casual fans to coming in. Rock wasn't enough. Just having the Rock in an extra small Renegades jersey wasn't enough on opening day. So anyhow.
Hussey's got a question here. Hussey was on our CFL stream. He texted in the chat. He said, killer numbers right now. We have 155 people watching. I can't see what's on Twitter, but on YouTube. And I said, just a little bit more interest in our CFL streamers right now. He says he's not sure if you answered this. Do you think we'll see a team in a new market that doesn't currently? You talked about the Ohio base that might be in place of the the Maulers or whatever. Like, we're not going to a new city here in 2024, right?
The original idea was for the Vipers to be in a new city, was for them to be in Arizona or Tennessee. But now in a merger situation, it might not be a Vipers at all. Interesting stuff with the Ohio deal. If the Generals go away, there's been a little bit of rumblings and talk about the Mike Riley taking over the Ohio franchise, so that there would be actually be an Ohio team. Riley's very close, by the way. I keep mentioning his name throughout this about the connection, about how this all started. Wasn't Jerry Cardinal knocking on the door with a tin cup? Moose Johnston has a connection, deep connection to Mike Riley. So any kind of merger, Mike's going to be a part of it unless he retires, even if there is no Generals. So it would be nice if Ohio had their own brand. Forget about the Ohio Maulers or the Ohio Generals. Let them get their own brand. And if you're going to play in Ohio, which I think is an awesome choice for a spring pro football league, to play in the Hall of Fame stadium, to play there, Ohio's a great market. But if you're going to play there, have an actual team with its namesake there. So that might be the best thing about this merger is that Ohio's actually going to have their team playing in Canton. That's probably maybe one of the better parts of this.
Evan, what do you make of all this? I want to make sure you're included. We got everyone else back in the conversation here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I have another question for Mike, but before
go for
that,
it.
I'll touch on a couple things first, briefly. I had brought up before. I think we've talked so much about, how odd it was for the USFL to, they sold that Canton Stadium quite a bit. Pro Football Hall of Fame. They had the championship game there. They made it a big deal. But it was so odd to just not have a team there. And again, Mike, before you came on the stream, I said, well, there's a couple different things you could do there. Like you could remove the Maulers and Generals entirely, or you could kind of like merge them together and create a new franchise there in Canton, which I think would be the best option because, again, you've already played there. You already have at least some, brand recognition. And I think Ohio is a decent market. But my question is, we've talked about, how this connects to some of the other leagues. I think some stuff goes without saying, but at the top of the show, we talked sort of about the timeline. And I know we've brought it up with you here, whether or not this is really possible to get done before 2024, which is what this report states. And, that's the direction things seem to be trending in. I guess my question for you, and, this is extremely specific, but I mean, you can just give me an idea or give us an idea, I suppose. When is the earliest that you think that we would hear some sort of statement from one of these leagues about, sort of like a public acknowledgement or maybe like the official announcement? Because I heard something like it could happen this week or next week. It could happen extremely suddenly. So I'm interested to see, like, do you think that's really a possibility, or do you think they're just that was said just to get some attention? We might not hear anything for a couple more weeks or even months. But again, I doubt it's months, because if they want to get it done before 2024, they kind of have to act fast at this point.
Yeah, the news reports made it seem like it's imminent. I talked to a couple of people who told me, hey, watch out for Thursday. And then I've been in touch with public relations people who said, we'll give you a heads up, Mike, but we're not hearing anything about any Thursday or Friday or anything like that. So I would assume that this is going to go down within a week. If it doesn't go down this week, I know people are dying for the answers right now. So maybe we do get something tomorrow. Maybe we wake up tomorrow morning and all of a sudden it's all laid out for us in clear and perfect detail. We have an understanding of this, but hopefully. But I think it would have to come soon, especially if the XFL intends to have their draft on October 4th. How are you going to have a draft with 8 teams and then all of a sudden have a merger with a bunch of different teams in your league and maybe some league teams disappearing? So that was very strange, Vipers, to be making a bunch of draft picks and then a week later they're not in the league anymore. So they're gonna have to make a decision. They're gonna have to, I'm just so surprised they've reached this point where they're ready to make this kind of grand decision. There's so many moving parts here. There's so many hurdles to me. So I would have to assume that if they really are close, as the media outlets are saying, that they've worked out all the finer details. They just haven't told their employees about what's coming. It's a little bit scary too on that end, because there's a lot of employees that could be losing their jobs in the PR side and the ticketing side, all that stuff. So there's the staffing side. So you're might have to break it to them. You might not have 2 PR guys as part of this show. So there's a lot of like I said from the beginning, there are a lot of people in the dark. about this whole setup. And I think we should get something soon if the reports are accurate. I'm surprised it's soon, but unless there's some snag, you have the regulatory aspect here too, where if you're 200 or 300 people are losing their jobs, there might be some people that are not going to prove that or think too highly of that. This merger might cause it, especially if the merger is somehow deemed to be something where it's just being done for more cost cutting rather than for building. It's just done so Fox could spend less and RedBird could spend less. That's maybe not get approval on that. So we'll see. But I keep waiting for like some kind of snag to come in. So forgive me for being the doomsday guy, but that's kind of like, especially in this space, which I've been following my whole life, I always expect a snag or something strange to happen. So, maybe within the week, Evan, I would assume with the draft coming up, unless you're going to push that back, right? They
Well,
could always push the draft.
that was my question. Because Mike, like, and this is one of those like, okay, let's keep business on as normal here. But I mean, 9 minutes ago, they tweeted like, we got the showcase coming up. Like, do we do a showcase here, in 2 weeks? Like, I don't know. But my real question is this, like, and we spoke about this on the group chat today, like, you're talking people losing their jobs. Like, if USFL, if Fox, whatever, just absorbs a lot of these position, like, hey, we got social people that can do, or we've got web people, or we can do like you said, that takes the burden off of the XFL of like, it's always been with USFL. It's felt like, Billy is doing Fox on NFL Twitter and then also gambler stuff, 20% of the time. Like, if they take over some of this XFL stuff, are we looking at a drop of communications for podcasts like us? I mean, XFL has been, far more blessed, for me. And I know a lot of people in covering this, like, does the social go down? There's been the complaints about the, obviously the USFL social. Like, that's my question. Like, if a lot of this gets offloaded to USFL, like, yes, okay, TV exposure and everything, but then some of the complaints we've always had about the USFL now is laid on the XFL as well. Like, how do they, balance that?
Well, whatever this merged league is called, whoever's in charge got to do a better job of the transparency, providing game notes, injury reports. Yeah, they got to do a much better job. I don't care who's at the head of the wheel, RedBird, whoever. Even the XFL had their failings on the PR side, promotional side, and all that, but it wasn't as bad as the USFL. I'll give them a break. They're undermanned, skeleton crew, all that. Like you said, Billy doing this job and that job and the other, but it's really kind of pathetic, their lack of interaction and transparency with media members who cover the league. And then they wonder why they have no attendance, why the ratings went down, why there's 42 Yahoos in the stands who all got in for free. So it's like, so you wonder, but so they have to do a better job. Whoever in this merged league, joint league, whoever's in charge of PR, they have to step up their game. They shouldn't be, I'm not saying you want to overspend, but you shouldn't be like scaling down. You didn't exactly knock it out of the park, buddy. So I'm sorry. So you need to do a better job with that. Both sides need to do a better job. The XFL's PR group, they tried. The USFL PR group, they have really bad math skills too. And so so it's like, that's kind of like the story there. So hopefully with this joint league does a better job when it comes to promotion and public relations and connecting with the media, transparency, giving the public information on your teams and players. It's kind of like important, while the game's going on. So that's kind of the story there. But anyhow, you would hope that this leads to a betterment of the overall product and presentation, not a weakening. Kind of like we're scaling back some more. That's not what you need.
Anthony, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really good experience with the XFL when it comes down to the PR stuff. I mean, the Renegades were absolutely incredible with me. Gamblers, not so much. Never, if I'm being honest, never really heard much from them. So that's why my coverage is a little more heavy on the XFL side. They were just more communicative with me, so I did more with them. So if these leagues combine together, they need to figure out how to, on the USFL side, they have to figure out how to communicate with media better, because it really did, from my perspective, it seems like it was either you had to be a part of a media group that was only for the USFL covering news, or you work for Fox, and that's really it. Like it just seems like everyone else, like even if you're covering both the XFL and USFL, it really did seem like we really had to struggle to try to get interviews, even just to get some kind of communication on depth charts and injury reports and stuff like that. Like it just seemed really tough to get that communication. So, I mean, to be honest, I hope the XFL can keep their people more and help out on those other teams for the USFL, because I think the PR people for the XFL have done a much better job than the USFL.
It's funny, Anthony. I'll just make this 1 minute. During the season, it got so bad with the USFL side. I'm doing the weekly previews for the New Jersey Generals that I had Brandon Anderson, our buddy, make me a graphic, a Generals Breakers depth chart graphic. And because I got the starters. I didn't have it. I got the starters from the teams through my sources. And I said, Brandon, could you do me a favor? These are the starting lineups. Could you make me a graphic? Because I suck at this stuff. And he did it for me. So thanks to him. But that's pathetic that I had to go through those lengths to write an article. And I covered the CFL, the Toronto Argonauts organization, top to bottom. They know how to, obviously win on the field and off. And their PR department is tremendous. I'm in the midst of all this crazy XFL stuff, and they're giving me information, and I'm writing articles, Michael Pinball Clemens and all that stuff. The last couple of days, the 2 extended contracts of key members of the organization. And so these leagues need to be like that, be more like that, I don't know about all the CFL teams, and they're not all in the same league. Argos are in a different stratosphere, but I wish the USFL was like that. It would make it easier to write articles. There's not transparency. You ask questions. Have there been interviews for the special teams coordinator job? Who's on the staff? Are there any new hires? Nothing. They don't give you anything. So you ask about players, you ask about profiles, you ask about anything. There's nothing. They don't give you anything. So you have to on your own. I have to on my own ask players, okay, did your 2-year contract with the USFL expired? Is your new deal for another 2 years? Hey, Toby, have you decided to re-sign with the deal? I got to go through all that to just write an article about that. So it was just funny that I had I would have done it. It would have been funny if I did it in crayon. I should have did the depth chart in crayon and just taken a picture of it and then put that as my main picture photo in the article. So it would have been like kind of the move there. So yeah, whatever this consolidated merger league is, hopefully they do a good job with the PR side.
I think your mic just got knocked over there. We had a question, extra points. I assume there will be an allocation of drafts for the remaining teams who draft top players. Yeah, like what happens, 10 teams out of 18 or right, 16, 10 teams. I can do math. 10 teams out of 16. What happens to the, we've talked staff and Evan's like, yeah, but what do they do with these players? I mean, times, 53, it's a lot.
It is a lot. You have to put like a bunch of players in a pool. And then if all of a sudden the Breakers, West Hill's available, there's gonna be a lot of teams that want him, or anybody other players from the Breakers if the Breakers aren't a part of this merger, or Vipers players. We'll see if Peter makes his way back. He's not currently on an NFL roster, but you got players like that, the Jeff Badets, all those kind of guys. So if the Vipers are no longer in existence, so they're gonna have to figure that there have to be maybe a supplemental draft with just those players to divvy them up. And try to create a fair system. Might be a little unfair if certain teams just all of a sudden load up. The Stallions would probably absorb the Breakers and become even more super teams than they already are. So anyhow, but yeah, I would think they would have to figure that out, because obviously player rights are no longer belong to teams if those teams are not in existence or are on pause, which could be the terminology that's used.
I'm gonna have to land the plane here pretty soon. I got a kind of a hard out here in a little bit. Evan, thoughts? I want to make sure we get any other questions. I got maybe like a firm 10 minutes here. If anyone else has any questions, in terms, for what we've got Mike and everyone on here. Evan, thoughts from you here while we see if anyone else has any questions coming in.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question, but I have a talking point that I was thinking about, just with everything that's been going on. And this has to do with football personnel as well. We've been talking a lot about, players that might end up displaced and, how they would, sort of find their way onto other rosters. But I think a lot about the guys, and this is XFL specific, but like you've had a lot of rights drafts and rights claims by these XFL teams, and it's going to be very interesting to see, like, what happens to some of those guys, like if their team just doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I understand, it's not, that there was a lot of confusion about how those worked out. A lot of people thought like those players were, under contract, and it didn't seem like that. So, do those guys just disappear, and was that all a waste of time? Because I feel like that, at least again from the personnel side, like if I just think about all like the, DPPs, GM type of guys where it's, you bring in all those players, you spent so much time evaluating them, you put in a rights claim, and then suddenly it's like, hey, sorry, your team's not going to exist anymore, and all your players are suddenly just gone, including the ones that, you were going to add, to the roster for this season who have never played a snap, have never really gotten an opportunity. So that was something I thought was kind of interesting, because that has been a big chunk, I think, of the XFL offseason is, yes, like everything that the XFL has done really in the offseason has been very player driven. Like I think about the combine, all that stuff. Again, all the rights claims, they've had these little drafts, the IFL, XFL combine that I was at, even that was a thing that was obviously very player centric. So yeah, I don't know. Like that's just kind of another random thing. It's like, well, are those players included in this draft pool? And is there an opportunity for at least them to rebound in one of these leagues if they've had their rights claimed? Like, I don't know. Again, it's one of those things that I think about that. Well, again, maybe not one of those things that I think about, but one of the things that just comes up as we talk about all this stuff. I mean, again, we can't stress how much information that there is regarding the subject. And obviously we've been talking for nearly 2 hours, but we've only been given so much, and it feels like to an extent we've just scratched the surface, because we don't, there's only so much that we know right now.
Mike, thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, as far as like player rights and all that, I guess all these teams are just going to carry over the players they already have on their roster, but they're going to have to figure out how they're going to do the drafts. But I would say it's really easy for these teams, because when we think about it, these players don't get paid all off season. We're talking about coaches now not being year-round employees. A lot of these players that are on these teams, the Thompsons, all these guys on the Gamblers, they're not getting a single check until they get to training camp, until they actually, their feet hit the turf. So like your USFL season ends in July. If you didn't latch on with an NFL team, you're going several months without a single dollar. You might have some medical coverage that maybe helps you out with certain things, but that's basically that. So it's the same thing with the XFL players. The XFL championship game ends in May. If you didn't latch on with an NFL team or go play in another league, they go up north to the CFL, you're not getting paid for a while. So these rights things are a way these teams to like add players to their roster without actually having to pay them. So it doesn't harm the financial model whatsoever. And you can add rights all day. It's going to be interesting to see like how far they expand these rosters. Last year, the Generals got in trouble with the league because they kind of broke rules and had too many players on their roster. They got punished.
And tens of people were affected.
Yeah, and tens of people were affected. So I don't like the USFL's roster rules. They're supposed to expand this year. I don't like the fact that they only have on game day. It's better than it was in year one, where it was like 35 players. But now it's like 40 active. I think it's supposed to go up to 42 active. So there's a lot of hurdles here. There's the 3-year CBA that the USFL has. The XFL doesn't currently have a CBA, so that's very complicated too. So there's a lot of moving parts here to try to figure out when it comes to players and teams for sure. So we haven't begun to unravel all of that yet.
Anthony, I want to toss to you.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know.
It's been the last 2 days just processing everything, just thinking about all the possibilities that can happen with this thing. I think at the end of the day, I think we're all just getting too excited about it, because I'm just thinking about the human element of this situation. That, if this thing does merge, we know this is going to get smaller. We know it's not going to be 16 teams. I think we can all pretty much assume 99% it's going to drop to 10 to 12 teams or 8 teams, and a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And I think that's somebody made the comment about like, this is part of mergers, this is part of life, is that people lose jobs at the end of the day with a merger. So I think there's going to be a lot of good people that lose jobs. There's going to be some players and coaches that are going to end up losing jobs. And that's kind of the shameful part of it. So after Reed just disappeared right there. But
he's moving himself around.
No, well, thank God they said no. I like was trying to do the comment, and I like swiped my trackpad too much, and it like went
cool.
took me out.
Like old school Hollywood Squares or something.
Yeah.
Like
anyway, the human element, Anthony.
Yeah, people losing their jobs, tough stuff for sure.
Yeah, it's a shame. And then, but again, like something I talked about this, and Mike, I know you're the gloom and doom person. I am too. Like this thing has to happen. I mean, to me, what this shows, this is a telling sign. If they're the two leagues talking to each other, that like you said, Mike, there's not a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we've been through this too many times over the last 2, 3, 4 decades where we've seen these spring leagues just die out after a couple of years because of finance. And honestly, if they don't merge together, we're going to see the same thing again. So yes, people are going to lose their jobs, but this league has to think about the long game. And if they don't get it done right now, I'm going to enjoy the ride with the USFL and the XFL to the very end, but I have a feeling that end is going to come within a year or two. So I would just tell everyone, brace for impact if they don't merge.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's going to be strange if we're sitting here saying go NSFL. So it's going to take a while to get used to that one.
Yeah. Reed, you screwed up there, Reed. You screwed up there, Reed.
The branding's available if they want it. I've abandoned it. It's free. It's free to go if you want to take it over. That's fine.
The NSFL. So I really, maybe it's just a fan in me. I really wish this was a 16-team league. I really do. I mean, I really wish this was like a full-blown merger. Put the two leagues together, like my crazy concept, XFL conference, USFL conference, interconference games, league championship at the end of the rainbow. That's what I kind of like want, but that's maybe not realistic. That's fantasy world stuff. For that to be a reality, I do think that the fact that both sides were receptive to this tells you that they realize that separately they might not be able to make it in the long haul. So I think this, but you have to do this right. Mergers don't always work. Like if you're a wrestling fan, you might remember the WWE buying WCW and then doing the alliance with WCW and ECW. And that was watered down and it was awful. And then they rebooted ECW. So it sounds great on paper. Holy cow. But sometimes it doesn't always work out. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. But I agree, Anthony. I think this is like a last-ditch effort to make this a success. I think they realize they can kind of survive and just get by, but I think both sides want to do more than just get by. They really want to be successful. They want to hit a home run. They want to win a Super Bowl. They want to win a championship. They're not interested in just like, having an 8-9 season and just barely missing the playoffs.
RedBird must have been really, I know we talked in the 60 million and Evan had really great comments on that earlier, but the restructuring, the firing the marketing people, laying off of a lot of this stuff, like RedBird must have been quite displeased with how everything wounded out here, just with looking now in retrospect, how far this has come since July.
Absolutely. I think they had this vision that they saw XFL 2020 success, and they had this vision that adding The Rock to it would really like make this like a mainstream hip. You have a female owner, you have The Rock. It's going to make it even better than it was in 2020. And that didn't really pan out. I do know people within the industry think that the $60 million loss is a lie. They think that's a low figure, that they should have lost maybe 300 million, 400 million, not 60 million. 60 million for to launch a new company, a pro football league with 8 teams. If you just start doing the math of how much each team costs and you spread 60 million out over 8 teams, that's really not that big of a loss. So like that's expected. Actually, you're supposed to, in what a pro football league, you're supposed to lose money, especially in the first year or two. So it's gonna. So anyhow, but yes, RedBird, they didn't hit. Like I said, that's information that people in the league, if they listen to this, they know I'm not lying. At the end of the season, leagues higher up, the president was basically telling the employees, we didn't hit our revenue markers. That's why we're going from full-time employees to seasonal. And so like everyone who's in the league and hears that, they know. How does Mike know that? Well, I know it. So they can't hide from that fact. And then that's just a fact. They thought they were going to be a smash success. They thought they were going to hit a home run. They hit a single. They got on base. It was all right. But RedBird is not in this to hit a single. They're not in this. Fox is not in this to just say, me get by. They really think this concept has a chance to be a major moneymaker. And so that's what they're trying to do. That's what this tells me right here. It's like both sides are like, all right, how do we thrive here? Let's do this together. The fact that they were willing to listen to each other, and if this is truly a 50-50 split, and it's cool that they were willing to listen to each other, and that whatever they were saying on both sides of the table, because it takes two to tango. One side could come over and say, hey, let's do this. The other side said, get the hell out of here. So you got to really sell them something really good for them to go, yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm in. So let's see what their vision is. Let's see what they put out, and then we can judge it from there whether or not this works. They might get more attention from the mainstream and casual crowd. How much of it, I don't know. But there are a lot of people that are not going to bother to watch the USFL in season 3. They're not going to bother to watch the XFL in season 2. But if you tell them there's a merged league between the two, maybe it sparks some extra interest. Let me check this out. What the hell are they doing? So it might. We'll see.
All right, I think we're going to put this to bed. I appreciate it. This has to be our most successful live stream. I mean, we got 161 people right now. I can't remember how much we had for the draft or whatever, but appreciate it's late for Mike making time. Evan has been on this with me since whatever the hell time we started talking CFL. Anthony making time. Game plan here, standby mode tomorrow. The professor, Andrew Murray, and I are going to record tomorrow. If news comes out, if not, we'll do a deep dive about all this, because obviously sprawling 2 hours here is great. But we'll do a segment for Friday's episode. Derek Taylor, voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, will be joining me as well, talking CFL. And then interest here, you would believe during this live stream, I booked Cam Phillips joining the show, a former XFL, now a Toronto Argonaut star. So Cam Phillips, we're recording tomorrow. Book that during the live stream. So I appreciate that, but we'll have him on the show Friday.
Hope he plays. He missed last week's game with like a groin injury. Hopefully he plays this week. So he's been great. He's been a leading receiver for the Argos this season.
Yeah, I'll get some questions from you, Mike, off cam, but I appreciate, like I said, make sure, guys, everyone, please subscribe, give a thumbs up. Ken's saying great show. CFLs. Yeah, if you're not subscribed, God bless you. Please subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. Mike giving us all this information. Pinned a tweet over on our, the Markcast Twitter, talking about the cities and or the teams and April start and all that stuff. But God bless everyone. Like I said, it takes a village to put on these productions. I appreciate all of you guys, and it's me just facilitating all you guys, smart people. So, Evan, thank you, Anthony and Mike. Really means a lot. We'll see you guys. And how do I get out of here? Every time I forget. We'll see you guys next time. God bless.